Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We still have a number. Hi, Katie. Still have a number that will be making their way in. But we do want to respect everyone's time here and especially squeeze in as much as we can into today, as well as the next two workshops. For those of you who I haven't met over the years, I'm Daryl Rutherford with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Our goal here is to really get in the Valley, help bring other resources into the Valley to help you guys with your jobs, do a little bit, be a little bit more effective. A lot of these resources we bring to you for free, including this workshop series. This is actually a series that's brought to you both by Corporation for Enterprise Development, which is CFED, and the Federal Reserve. And we've brought all of our resources together so that you guys just come and hang out, have a good time. We'll have lunch in a little bit. Of course, it'll be a working lunch. And we'll have a wonderful presentation and some great hands-on activities to go through. As some of you may know, the Fed has a real big interest in making sure that lower income populations have opportunities to increase their financial wealth. It helps make our economy work better, go a little bit more smoothly. And so we thought it would really be important if we could bring all of you guys together from the Valley and develop a learning group on how you guys can work together, share best practices, and move forward in your missions to address household financial security, but doing so with a cohort of others within your communities. We have representation from Stockton all the way down to Bakersfield and scattered out throughout the rest of the Valley. So really pleased to see so many folks here today. The objective of the series, though, is really to create a better understanding of what it means to help families become more financially secure and be able to prosper in our economy. We really want to work with you to help prepare participants to assess the viability of integrating the range of asset building opportunities that you guys provide to them. And finally, we want to demonstrate the power and pitfalls as well as the strategies for success in coalition building. How many people are part of some type of a coalition collaborative? I'm sure you understand challenges inherent within those, and so hopefully this series will help you kind of break through some of those barriers and really move forward with have more effective programs. Today's workshop series, though, is really just going to be an introduction into some of the tools that are at your disposal. CFED has done some great work around asset building, developed a great framework, and have put out a lot of awesome publications. And we're still going to be using that information to carry on these series. We also want to, again, identify what these financial barriers are that are affecting the results of your programs, and see if as a cohort and as some resource providers we could address those and make them much more effective. Finally, we'll also be developing a set of indicators to consider, for you guys to consider as you integrate them into your programs as well. So, we're going to try to squeeze a lot into the next 4 hours here. So I hope you guys are all ready for a fun-filled activity. We have restrooms right out the hall here, around to the right. If you need to take a cell phone call, we totally understand. Please do so outside of the building so you don't disturb anyone within these offices here. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to our friends at CFED. Jim Brooks.
Thank you, Daryl. It is great to see such a wonderful turnout. This is fantastic. And just to hear sort of the diverse areas that you come from in the Central Valley. My name is Jennifer Brooks, and I'm the Director of State and Local Policy at CFED. For those of you who don't know CFED, we're actually a national organization based in Washington, D.C., although I'm coming this morning from the Bay Area, from Oakland, which is where I live. And we are a 30-year-old organization that's committed to expanding economic opportunity. What we really mean by that is helping more people achieve the American dream, whether that's the dream of buying a home, or that's the dream of sending a kid to college, the dream of starting a business, or just providing a better future for your family. The way that we do that is we look across the country for good ideas, we test them out on the ground, and then try to take the good ideas to scale through changes in public policy and changes in private markets and programs. Kate and I are here today under the auspices of the Assets and Opportunity Network, which, if you're not familiar with that, is, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're not, because it's a pretty new national movement-oriented network of people that really is trying to answer the call for a more coordinated and effective constituency that can advocate for public policies at the federal, state, and local level, as well as for a better and more effective way to collaborate nationally, to share and to test out new ideas and economic opportunities. I just wanted to spend a moment talking a little bit about the Assets and Opportunity Network so you understand that context, and then this is going to come back again in workshop number 3 when we start talking more explicitly about coalition building. But the way that we are building sort of this peer learning community and advocacy community is really through five types of activities. The first is that we do virtual learning groups. So these are small groups of self-selected people who are interested in learning about a specific topic in a time-limited way, identifying their learning goals, and then working together toward those. The second way is through webinars, and these webinars may be on program design, on policy change, a specific strategy, but it's sort of a low-cost way to get information out to a lot of people. The third way is events like this, so regional in-person convenings. And where we do these is really limited to where we have funding to do it, so I want to just recognize the funder for this workshop series, which is the Walter S. Johnson Foundation. And they have an interest in the Central Valley as well as Washoe County, Nevada. So they, along with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, are providing the resources that are making this event and the future 2 events possible. We also do large-scale in-person convenings. So every 2 years, CFED puts on the Assets Learning Conference. I hope that many of you have had the opportunity to go to an Assets Learning Conference. Our event last year had more than 1,000 people at it, so it was a great opportunity to network and learn from peers. In the off years from the Assets Learning Conference, our vision is that we will have a general member convention, a network convention. So this is an opportunity for maybe not all 1,000 members of the Assets and Opportunity Network, but maybe half of them to come together in Washington, D.C., set some priorities for where the network will go in the coming years, network, learn from each other, learn from experts, and since we're in Washington, D.C., do a little policymaker education to show our muscle and talk about the experiences that we have on the ground working with people and the struggles that they face and how policy can support that. The fifth way that we act together is around doing joint public policy advocacy. To date, that's really been around federal policy issues, but in the future we expect to be leading some state-level national campaigns on state-level policy or local-level policy for that matter. So that's sort of what the network is. That's why we are here today. Kate and I are going to be your main trainers, and I'm going to turn it over to Kate now to introduce herself, walk through the agenda, and get you all to introduce yourselves.
Okay, thanks, Jen. I'm just really excited to be here, and thank you all for coming and joining us. I actually did fly in yesterday from DC, so my apologies if sometimes we have to wane a little bit in energy. So my name is Kate Griffin. I actually, in terms of sort of my background and why I came here today, I spent the last 12 years working on financial security and asset building internationally in the field of microfinance. In the last couple of years of doing that, I focused exclusively on savings. Really worked at a number of projects that resulted in 500,000 people opening savings accounts and starting to save. So that's the sort of background that I brought to CFED, where I started working more domestically over the last year, and specifically really focusing on this issue of how do you take issues of financial security and asset building and integrate them into other human service, social service programs. I've been working intensively with 5 social service organizations over the last year on that specific issue, ranging from workforce development to community action agency, a child support enforcement agency, so a diverse range of organizations. And I've also just done a big project with HHS on identifying opportunities for them to do a better job of integrating these asset building strategies across a range of HHS programs. So Head Start, the child support role child welfare, things like that. So, but I also think that this is, training is really a dialogue. And there's so much for us to learn from one another here in this room. Jen and I have really tried to create an interactive day and set series of sessions. So we're excited to have the opportunity to do that. So here's how the day is going to flow. We've got a little icebreaker exercise that we'll do first off. And then really talk about sort of making the case around asset building strategies. Why should we really care about this? If you want to strengthen or introduce even asset building strategies within your organization, the first thing that you're going to need to do is make the case and get people to buy in. Everybody from your frontline staff up to your board. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about some tools and ways that you can go about making that case and making it in a strong and effective way. We've got an exercise that you can do to help kind of practice, think about how you would do that in your own organization. And then we're going to go take it to the next step. You've made the case for why asset building strategies would be important for your organization. And then going to the next step, which is, all right, so then how do asset building strategies actually connect to the work that I'm doing? So in this room here today, we have people that do everything from workforce development. I think there's a health group. There's folks that are working with farming communities. There's a whole range of different organizational missions represented here today. And how do you make that leap so that asset building strategies are something that actually makes sense within the context of your organizational mission? We'll be working on that. And all of that then builds into the second workshop, where we'll really be much more focused on programmatic design and actual implementation. So that's sort of the flow of the day. Around 12:45, we'll break for lunch and have, it can be a bit of a working lunch as you work in the exercise. So with that, I think we'll head into a little bit of an icebreaker. Slide here. Great. So what we really love, and this is also really helpful for me, as I have not gotten to spend a terrible amount of time in California in the past, although I did have one really interesting week in Davis, California. Everyone has a little. But we'd love for you to introduce yourself, obviously your name and the organization that you come from, and to help me out. And also, I think this will be a really interesting way to view kind of the array of organizations we have in the room. Put a little push pin in our map here that shows us roughly where your organization is located. And if you could state sort of one positive asset that your community has that helps families build financial stability, we'd love to hear about it. And if you want to, for folks that are more than one person from that organization, if you want to combine your answers on that, that's fine too. Great, sound good?
I have push pins, so why don't we just sort of go down the line, and you can come up here and get a push pin and sort of say your positive asset and where you're from, and then stick it in the map. I feel like I'm passing out the meeting.
Good afternoon, my name is Maini Fang, and I'm the Disability Resource Coordinator for Madera County Workforce Investment Corporation, also known as Madera County Development or Workforce. So we are, let's see, is it actually? And how we help families build financial stability. Well, we're the workforce, we're the one-stop, so that's pretty much all that we do is helping adults return to the workforce, primarily for the disability program that I oversee. It's a required component for the grant to work with that particular population and how to help them build financial stability and to get them banked. So that's definitely important to us. She's only one, so yeah. She's the same, yes. You can put the same.
I too, with Madera County Workforce Investment Corporation, or also known as Workforce Development Office. We can say what you really want to put here. As Maini said, she's kind of overseeing the Disability Employment Initiative grant that we have. But we also, as she stated, have adult and unemployed workers that we assist, and also youth. And pretty much all on the same line, trying to get them into self-sufficiency and achieving their goals in life, and things like that, getting them on the right path, and rerouting them into new careers, either because the economy's changed their career or they just need that step up in that assistance. So
Valladolid, and I'm from Modesto, California, in Stanislaus County. I work for El Concilio, which is the Council for the Spanish Speaking. We are in both Stanislaus and San Joaquin counties. We have various different services that we offer, including workforce development in San Joaquin County. But I'm the coordinator for Stanislaus County, so one of the things that we do that is unique at my agency from San Joaquin is that we offer the foreclosure prevention counseling, and we also offer financial literacy courses. And we're actually going to start offering them not only in Spanish and English, but in Hmong. So that's also very important for our community. So I'm going to put myself right there between those two counties.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Hill. I work for the San Joaquin Valley CRA Collaborative. It's kind of different than I think some of the other organizations here. It's an organization composed of nonprofits and financial institutions and government regulators such as DARO that is trying to get more resources for community development in the San Joaquin Valley, utilizing the Community Reinvestment Act and other programs like that. We got very recently, just in this room last week, had a very unique event, which is sort of like speed dating for nonprofits and financial institutions. I'm not in any specific county since the entire San Joaquin Valley is represented in our collaborative. And if any of you are interested in potentially looking at Community Reinvestment Act things to try to get more resources for your organization, I would encourage you to talk to me at some point during the day.
I'm going to put a dot.
You can put one in all of them.
Good morning, my name is Maria Rodriguez. I'm with CarePoint Credit Counseling Solutions. And the office I work in is right here in Fresno, so I didn't have to drive very far. But what we do at our agency is assist homeowners to reach their financial goals by using their credit as an asset, by becoming debt-free, and also, helping them preserve their existing assets, such as their housing is what they're looking to do. But also by accomplishing their goals, then they can be able to reach that financial stability. So here in the Valley, I think our greatest asset, especially in Fresno, is that we all have access to land, where in other cities or area or counties, we don't have that access. Yes, so we still have a lot of land to cover, and I think that's our biggest opportunity.
Hi, good morning. We are both from United Way.
Bakersfield?
Yes.
And I'm Susanna, she's Irene. Thank you. So I'm going to say that one of the assets that Kern County has to offer families is a program that we have out of United Way is called the IDA program. And it's a match savings program where people can save and at the same time they learn to budget, and they can either buy a house, their first home, start a business, or go to school, or fund their kids' education. And we are one of 2 agencies in Kern County that has this program. So that's kind of where we are with that. And we are, Kern County's pretty big here. There.
I also want to say we offer the income tax, free income tax to low-income families, and we have many families benefiting from this program.
Good afternoon, I'm Irma Garcia with Fresno Housing Authority. I work for the Resident Opportunity Self-Sufficiency Program. So I work with low-income public housing as far as creating events, workshops, anything that's going to help our tenants with education, getting their GEDs, budgeting, financing, literacy, anything that's going to help them move up and out. That's the best service. I've been doing it about a year. I was in different departments, but this I have found to be most rewarding. It is. And of course, it's in Fresno.
My apologies and disclaimer for the next person here. We actually have representation from Sacramento.
I'm an interloper. I'm an interloper.
And she's going to have to go off now.
I'll go off. I think I'm up here somewhere. I just moved here a couple years ago, so I might be somewhere up there.
Somewhere there.
Somewhere up there, north of here. My name is Janice Durkee. I'm the program officer for income and health at the United Way of the California Capital Region. And we are involved in a number of different aspects in financial stability and self-sufficiency for families. One, I am the bank on coordinator for the California Capital Region. Two, we fund organizations who also deliver an IDA program to foster youth in particular. We also do financial education, and hopefully that's turning into financial coaching in the fall. So we're going through a transition of what we fund in the fall. I also am on the steering committee for the Local Assets and Opportunities Network, which has turned into our Income Collaborative. And we are right now convening, and Sonia, you're part of that. We're convening organizations together to create an active referral partnership network. So all of our financial stability organizations who are working in the area of financial stability can actually work with each other. So in particular, like our foster youth IDA recipients can have an organization that after they emancipate, they can actually continue their financial stability work with an organization that works with adults. So it's kind of where we are right now.
Good morning, I'm Katie Christensen. I'm with Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Kern and Tulare counties. My office is in Bakersfield. I'll put my little push pin right in it. I'm going to knock it over in the middle here. And we're a nonprofit community service that provides credit counseling, financial counseling, and education on getting out of debt, savings, budgeting. We do the foreclosure prevention and counseling as well to help people save their homes. And we also do the bankruptcy counseling and education to help people who are looking at that path to hopefully not to repeat it again. Still here today, yeah. I know.
My name is Norma Rojas Mora, and I'm with the Housing Authority of the County of Kern. And I'd say one positive asset in our community is we do administer the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, which people who live in our housing qualify for the program. They sign a 5-year contract of participation, and we help them, as they're meeting their goals, they have the potential of having an escrow account. So if they meet all their financial goals or all their goals at the end of 5 years, we issue a check for the amount of what's in their escrow account. And so we've had checks as small as $200 to as large as $30,000. So it's really on the individual. So we are in Kern County.
Good morning, my name is Yolanda Lopez. I also work for the Housing Authority of the County of Kern, and I work for the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, as Norma mentioned. But I'd also like to mention that within that program, we work with United Way for the individual development account to help our families work towards homeownership or building the asset of owning their own business or providing for going to college. And we also refer a lot of our families to Katie over there for their credit repair. We provide services to all of Kern County with working right now with over 300 families and with low-income public housing, but our office is in Bakersfield.
Hello, my name is Michael Shubin. I work for First Five Fresno County, and we are a funder of programs, and we fund programs throughout Fresno County that help children and their families try to succeed and be healthy when they first start school. We do a lot of parent workshops with our providers, and a lot of them, they do financial education, like how to pay their bills and stuff like that, and how to fiscally manage your money.
Hi there, I'm Gloria Johnson. I am with Titus Financial Solutions in Stockton, California, San Joaquin County. We have helped positive things that we have done in our community is to help individuals and families to save their homes. We help them through the process of gathering all the paperwork, making sure it's accurate, submitting it directly to the servicers, and guiding them throughout the whole process. And when they can't keep their homes, we guide them through the alternative measures like short sales, etc., deed in lieu. And right now we're doing credit counseling and budgeting to bring them back into the market to purchase homes. And a lot of people now are trying to purchase, and this has been very good for us to help them get back. They didn't like renting, they didn't like the apartments, the schools, etc. So right now they're coming to us for help to purchase in the communities that they would like to live in.
My name is Cynthia Summers. I'm with the Stockton branch of the NAACP. I'm the housing chair. And what we've been doing in our community of Stockton, we've been doing financial literacy, collaborating with the local banks for our high school students, so at least getting in the families, this younger generation started to a positive step of to do in the realm of finance. And we've been working with foreclosure alternatives and collaborating with different counseling agencies in that community to help owners to make a decision of what they need to do in their life as it relates to their homes and cut their losses, and so they can move on with their life. And additionally, we are recently working with families who's re-entering the market because those who have lost their homes, they're in a position where they can buy homes again. So the positive things, we have different agencies in Stockton and San Joaquin County that we collaborate with to help our families become whole again in Stockton, San Joaquin County.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Carlos Lopez. I'm with California Human Development. I run the Work Start Youth Program. We work with 17 and 18-year-olds. What we do is we provide paid work experience for our youth. With that, most of them, this is their first job that they've had. So they must complete 10 workshops ranging from financial, how to manage their money, how to open a bank account. I mean, just those beginning steps to get going. We also provide campus tours to universities, vocational colleges, private companies, anything that they're interested in. We expose them to those career pathways. And they have to do life skills workshops and participate in community events that are in the community.
Good morning, my name is Joe Diaz and I'm also with Carlos. We work for California Human Development. California Human Development provides employment services and training in not only in San Joaquin County but also in other counties north of all the way to the state line with Oregon. Well, what we do in San Joaquin, we have a training center in Stockton, a vocational training center. I teach vocational English as a second language. And lately we have also started providing workshops on financial literacy. We call it sus finanzas. Since we work with farm workers, we have language problems. We provide the instruction both is necessary, English or Spanish. They need to learn how to shop for banks, because if they don't know, they fall into traps. They don't know how to administer the money. That's the biggest problem we see in with the population that we are working with. They really need to learn literacy, financial literacy. Otherwise, they get entrapped by the banks, paying penalties and this and that because they don't know how to administer. So we also teach them budgeting. We train them for jobs like truck driving, welding, construction, forklift operation, and different. In the other centers, we depend on what the job market is. Okay. And we are in Stockton, San Joaquin County.
Good morning. My name is Simone Lamb, and I'm with Community Partnership for Families of San Joaquin. We have 6 family resource centers in San Joaquin County. And let's see, one positive asset. We actually provide, well, besides connecting families to resources within the community, we directly provide the VITA, the Voluntary Income Tax Assistance Program. Just recently, we ended our tax season assisting over 4,100 families, brought back $4.4 million back into San Joaquin County. And and I'm here to learn. I mean, I've heard some great ideas already. One thing that we would like to build on is our financial economic success portion. Right now, we do partner with banks and different organizations who come into our family resource centers and provide financial education, teaching families how to budget. But we would like to take it to the next step because we have families coming in and they're getting back $8,000 all the way to 10, 12. One actually didn't do their taxes for many, many years and got back over $20,000. And so it's just a matter of us trying to get the tools that we need to make sure that we position that family towards financial success and not, come back for our services like 2 years from now looking to need an application for like PG&E assistance or something. So I'm learning today. Oh yes,
That's good to start a business.
My name is Jose Leon Barraza. I'm the former Director of Economic Development for the County of Fresno. I retired about 3-4 years ago. And one of the problems I noticed right away is that Fresno is #1 in poverty in the state and #2 in the nation. And the Valley, we're very similar, the surrounding counties. So I wanted to get involved in something that would improve economic conditions. And my job before was helping businesses. Well, we have created this nonprofit corporation called Southeast Fresno Community Economic Development Association. And we're in the process of opening a business and family prosperity center where we're going to have all kinds of information that is useful for residents, for business owners, and help people open new businesses. And the location of the office is not far from here. And we see the United Way as a tremendous partner to have close to us because they have a lot of resources. And there are other organizations that we want to connect with where we don't have expertise. Housing, I'm sure there are, and I'm familiar with a couple of other groups. So that's what we're trying to do, basically make a difference in having an impact on the problems of poverty we have in Fresno. The location I indicated is in Fresno. It's not far from here. And so I just put this one. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emmy Blankenship, and I'm with United Way of Tulare County, and I see I'm the very first one for our county only. We do a variety of things, but I'm only going to mention one because there's so many. We fund organizations throughout Tulare County that provide financial stability training. I'm also the program manager for the Emergency Food and Shelter Fund in Tulare, so I provide the recipient organizations with capacity building on being able to provide good case management to the individuals that are receiving assistance with their utility bills, so that we don't have them coming back the following year looking for assistance, but building their financial stability and leading them away from dependency.
My name is Lupe Martinez. I'm with the Center on Race, Party, and the Environment. CRP, as we call it, has been around for about 20 years. We're an environmental justice organization. And we've been in different places. And right now, we're also in Tulare and in Kern. However, we have work in Alaska, national work also. I'm not going to say everything that we're doing, because I'm going to let my colleague over here do the other piece more specific. We have an office in San Francisco, an office in Kern County in Delano, right there at the county line, Tulare and Kern. And we also have 5 attorneys at this time and are getting ready to hire a few more. And also with organizers, we have 5 organizers at this time. We use the attorney sometimes for organizing. Yeah, that's great. And we're focused a lot into all of the issues of environment within our rural communities that are always the ones who get hit with a lot of the things that a lot of us don't want in our other communities. So we're dealing not only with air and water, but one of the other things that we wanted to make justice to our name is the poverty piece that we haven't done as well as perhaps we have with the other things. And on the poverty, we're working at this point in looking at community gardens, into cooperatives, into other things. So I'm going to let my colleague do the rest.
Gustavo Aguirre, with Center of Race Poverty and Environment. I think Lupe said most of it, but I think one project that he mentioned is community gardens, which this year is becoming reality with 4 communities, and we are planning to expand to other communities. One of those is in 4 acres of land, which is great. Others are like 1 acre, and another is a little bit less. But the other thing that we do is we do capacity building, and we help community groups, grassroots groups, to establish in their communities so they develop their leadership and take on issues that are affecting them, and helping them also not only fighting the polluters, but helping those community groups to look and identify resources for the infrastructure issues that they have in their communities.
Hi everyone, my name is Aida Macedo. I'm a little bit of an oddball here, but I'm actually in private practice and associated with Miles Sears and Iani, which is a local small firm here in Fresno, a law firm. And I was in legal aid before and worked for various civil rights organizations, and I'm looking for ways to get involved in terms of helping the community with financial literacy issues or economic development, and also trying to figure out how to have pro bono attorneys or new attorneys in the area help with these issues and have pro bono services work on some of these. So I think there's a lot of potential, and there's a lot of potential for coalition building, and I really want to be involved. I think financial literacy and economic development is something I'm very interested in, but it's also very new to me, so I'm here to learn and to see what I can add kind of to my toolbox so that I can help the community and also bring in other lawyers or other legal services that might be helpful to the community.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Povizai, and I'm from Stockton, San Joaquin County. Had I known there were other Stocktonians, we could have carpool, because that was a long drive on your own. I work for a Family Resource and Referral Center. We are a direct service program. We help a lot of our families become self-sufficient. We offer subsidized child care, food program, a lot of community resource and referral out there in the community. But one positive asset that we offer is that we teach our clients to build up a small business to become licensed child care providers. So we offer a lot of classes, child development classes, and we work very closely with the state licensing to help these clients become self-sufficient.
Hi everyone. I'm also kind of odd in that I'm in Sacramento. But my name is Sonia Airy. I'm the Director of Asset Building Programs for the California Coalition for Rural Housing. Yeah, so we're like, I don't know, around here-ish. Somewhere. And of course they're taping the workshop where I spilled coffee on my shirt. But anyway, so I oversee two main programs. One is our IDA network. So soon we're going to have 4 partners in the San Joaquin Valley administering the IDA program. And the other program it's called National Neighbor Silver, which is a national program, obviously, that supports financial empowerment for older adults, so 55 and up. So, yeah, thanks.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Camille Plano. I'm an attorney at the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is actually headquartered in Oakland, so I feel like an interloper, but I'm their Fresno office. But I'm just me, so so you can put me in Fresno or Oakland, either one's fine. And also formerly at the Center for Race, Poverty, and the Environment, so I'm very excited to see my colleagues here today. Our center works mostly with communities, particularly low-income communities of color and immigrant communities that are seeking to create asset wealth or economic resilience through alternative strategies. So we do a lot with time banks, cooperatives, alternative and local currencies. And so in terms of a positive asset, I think we think of assets a little differently than traditional community financial services or community economic development. So we really believe in the individual power of people and communities, and that's kind of where we try to focus a lot of our resources. And I'm an attorney, so I do direct services to help make that possible.
Morning. I a few interlopers here, and I'm going to do the same thing. My name is Jeff Sands, and I'm the Director of School Development for the California Charter Schools Association. Our office is in both Sacramento and in Los Angeles. My region is everything that's on the map. But I live in Fresno, and like her, I'm just me, and I am the office. And so wherever my car goes, so goes the office. I also am really an interloper right now. We don't actually do anything. Pause for laugh. In terms of direct services to families to build financial stability, the work that I do, the work the association does, we help develop charter public schools and advocate on their behalf in Sacramento, helping build organizational capacity, developing more schools. But the reason I'm here is because of their dual nature as both a public agency and as a nonprofit organization. Charter public schools are, I believe, we're in a very unique position as a primary access point for families who are in need of your services, but I think in many cases, your organizations, and I'm going out on a limb, I don't go too far, have some difficulty accessing or getting, interacting with some of those families that need it. And I'm here as a proxy for them and as a bridge to help strengthen the relationship between the public education system through the nonprofit vein of charter public schools and the work that you all do to help build financial stability, primarily because that is, and the report that was just put out this morning, that is the #1 predictor of long-term student success, adult success, is the financial security of our families and of students going into public education systems. Thanks.
Well, it's still morning, so good morning. My name is Blong Lee. I'm the manager for the Fresno CFI. We are a subsidiary of the Fresno OC. We're in Fresno, but we serve actually 9 counties and expanding to 11 counties. Basically, San Joaquin Valley plus right now we serve Monterey on the coast, and then we're adding San Benito and Mariposa counties. So that's our target. The one thing that we do, actually, we have multiple things that we do, but we have financial education that we provide to a lot of our business customers. We do primarily business lending, and so that's our target market. We do have a couple of consumer products, primarily to help individuals establish or rebuild their credit. We work closely with United Way, Fairpoint, and some of the local partners here. Our services are we're here, we offer those services to everybody within those 11 counties that we serve. We are also in the process of chartering a credit union. It's going to be designated a CDC, which is a community development credit union for low-income members. The reason for that is, we see a lot of these payday lenders preying on low-income community members, and so that's one of our ways that we'd like to bring in those people, educate them, and get them into banking situations. And I'm going to let my colleague Jeremy talk more about the business technical assistance that we provide that kind of relates to how they can build financial stability as well.
I'm Jeremy Hofer. I'm the Business Development Manager at Fresno Community Development Financial Institution. Try saying that 5 times fast. We do primarily micro-lending. These are loans for entrepreneurs, startup loans, expansion loans under $50,000. We have a new product that we're working with Kiva on. Kiva.org is a crowdsourcing model for raising capital that way. Loans under $10,000. We do go up to $250,000 for larger enterprises. So we're really dealing with the gamut of all kinds of businesses that don't quite fit the bank's box at this point, but we hopefully can bridge them through to the point where they can access traditional capital. On the technical assistance side of things, we do a lot of pre-loan preparation, loan readiness workshops, partnering with banks throughout the region. I was just up in Turlock and Modesto, Tracy in a couple weeks, so we're doing North and South Valley outreach on loan readiness. But then on the other side of things, credit building, so the secured credit card product is one tool that we use and then coupled with education around how to clean up credit, how to build it, the gamut. So it's good to be here. Thanks.
I forgot to say one thing, that we've operated the IDA programs, and we were probably one of the first in California to do that. Since 1990, we've had several IDA programs. At one point, we had the largest IDA program in the country. That was funded with funds from the Kellogg Foundation, so we ran a $1.5 million IDA program here. We're just finishing that.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Seba from United Way of Fresno County. Welcome to our building. Welcome to Fresno. I'm the one with the camera, and the reason for the camera is we want to put this on the local media access channel as well as put it on YouTube. So if you don't want to be on camera, just let me know and I will pull you out. If not, the camera will focus just on the presentation. So thank you for being here. Oh, I forgot. You all are here with me today in Fresno at the United Way.
Jen, we have Baldwin. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Baldwin Boy. I'm the California Legal Assistant. We're a statewide arm of legal services. We have 22 offices around the state, and there's one of the smaller ones. I run the office. In terms of asset building in financial security, what's happening in Madeira, I'm not that aware of a whole lot of that happening. I think there's some that the Housing Authority does, and I guess to the extent that South Health does any sweat equity home ownership program, I guess that's asset building. In terms of our own office, there's two things what we're doing. One is that we provide financial counseling and actually advocacy for people who are losing their homes through foreclosure. So that's one. Secondly, our office works directly with the Fresno Works Consortium that actually pressured the high-speed rail authority to set aside 30% of the jobs for disadvantaged communities. And currently we're trying to pressure them to actually put in some sanctions in their collective bargaining agreement. Lastly, we work with a community-based organization. I'm counsel to their board, and they actually have a $10 program that they run for a number of years and then kind of died for lack of interest and then been resurrected recently.
Thank you all so much. It's amazing just to hear the diversity of experiences and programs that you all are running. So, I think it's our job really to kind of pull out all of these wealth of experiences as we really dive into making the case for asset building today, and then moving on to into the other workshops. Jen, I'm going to hand it over to you. We've got a clicker. If you'd like to use that.
Really quick though, do I just see two gaps, Merced and Kings? Is that what it is? We have Stanislaus. So Merced and Kings, huh? Well, looks like we got some work to do.
So we were remiss in our introductions as well by not thanking the United Way and Savag for the generous offer of this So I was blown away by the experience in this room, the experience that the work that you are already doing around financial security and asset building strategies. And so, our challenge really is to bring more to the table to help you feel like you left today left this entire series with more than what you came with. So the way that we framed out today's session was really that it was focused on framing, selling, and showing the impact of asset building strategies. And that's because we know that you've got your line of business, you've got a thing that you already do. But chances are that hopefully we will inspire you to do more and to do different. And that will probably mean making the case to somebody, whether that's to your executive director, your board of directors, a funder, a policymaker who you want to support this. And regardless of who it is, the approach to making the case is pretty similar with, the tweaks and customization, of course. So that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about the why, the what, and the how of making the case. And so just as an overview, the first part of making the case, of course, is communicating why somebody should ask. So the way that we tend to do that at CFED is to paint a picture of a problem that needs to be solved. And to really connect that problem to what the person you're trying to persuade, what do they care about? Connect that problem to what they care about. Then you need to be clear about what your audience can do about it. There's nothing like, describing a big problem and then going, what do we do about that? So it's really important that you bring solutions to the table and solutions that sort of move the person you're trying to persuade from wherever their starting point is to where you want them to go. And then the third piece of this is talking about how the person you're trying to persuade in a concrete way, how they can put the great solution that you have into action. So you want to give concrete examples that directly relate to what the person you're trying to persuade is already working on. So what I'm going to do in the next 20 to 30 minutes or so is just to share some research that we've done in the asset building field over the past 20 or so years about the impact that asset building can have on a person's life. I'm going to talk about some new data from CFED and the Assets and Opportunities Scorecard that really describes how families are faring here in California, and then provide a framework that we use as a starting point to really make the case to a number of different kinds of stakeholders around a number of different kinds of strategies. And we're doing this because we really want to encourage you to borrow any of this. We can make this PowerPoint available after the fact, and we'd love to, a little citation that if you use our slides verbatim, but this is information we want to share with you and for you to use in making our case. So, depending on your audience, I often like to start by describing the impact that assets can have on a person's life. And I'll often start with the roots of the asset building field, and this may be a story that you already know, you already tell, and you work it into the pitches that you make to whoever you're trying to convince. But it's a way to sort of add legitimacy. These are not a bunch of just crazy ideas that we made up with yesterday, that this work and this approach has been around for a couple of decades now and does have research to support it. So I start off sort of at the beginning and talk about the fact that the approach to asset building really began in the early 1990s when a researcher named Michael Sheraton wrote a book called Assets and the Poor. And the essential insight from that work was that assets matter. So assets matter economically, they matter socially, and they matter psychologically in a way that income by itself does not. In the last 20 years, there's been a whole slew of additional research that has really reinforced that original insight that assets matter. And the research really demonstrates that income is necessary. And so this is not a choice that we're setting up here. It's not either you focus on building people's incomes or you focus on building people's assets. Income is critical, but by itself it's not sufficient for financial stability or for economic mobility. It used to be that people could count on doing better than their parents. It was each generation did better than the generation before. Well, research demonstrates that today that's really no longer the case. And in fact, 40% of people who are born in the bottom income quintile will stay there as adults, 40%. And 70% who are born in the bottom income quintile never make it above the middle. So this idea, this rags to riches idea, is really more mythology today than it is any kind of guarantee without some intervention. So, you know, some research says it's harder to build assets than it used to be, but it's certainly no less important. We know that research demonstrates that having assets can increase a family's economic mobility. In addition to that, there's a wealth of other, no pun intended, other positive benefits of having assets. The first is that it can create resiliency in the face of economic hardship. Assets can promote long-term thinking and planning. They enhance well-being and life chances of children. They're linked to increased likelihood of going to and succeeding in college. And they're also linked to reduced marital dissolution and reduced domestic violence. And very recent research actually on the connection between having assets and college success really demonstrates that you don't have to amass some vast amount of wealth in order to have this assets impact. Some research I read just the other day talked about the fact that kids who have an account for college in their name, and there can be $3 literally in that account, were 4.5 times more likely to go to college than kids who didn't have an account in their name. So it's about changing people's heads, changing the expectation, turning that child into someone who expects to go to college, and that's really the value. So in making the case, we tend to start off sort of saying why assets matter in the first place, and then we sort of want to make that more concrete for people. So, okay, great, assets are a wonderful thing, but why should I care about whether people in Fresno are building assets? And the reality is because people aren't. They are living on the edge of financial collapse. They're focusing on today's needs instead of prioritizing for today's goals, for tomorrow's goals, excuse me. And so the way that we tend to make the case is to use the data in what we call the assets and opportunities scorecard. So the scorecard is a data tool and resource that we are now producing every year, and in January, at the end of January, we released the 2015 scorecard. I want to again walk through the data in the scorecard for California. It provides state-specific information and encourage you to borrow what's useful and leave behind what's not. The main finding from the 2013 scorecard is that both nationally and here in California looks very much like the national average in many ways. Nearly half of families, 44% of households, don't have a basic personal safety net that they can use for emergencies or to start saving for future needs. These are families that we call liquid asset poor, which means that nearly half of families in California don't have 3 months worth of savings to make it through if a job loss or some other kind of emergency meant that income stopped coming in the door. I think when you think about liquid asset poverty, you probably think about income poverty. You think, well, these are poor folks. These are income poor folks who fall below the federal poverty guideline. And while it's true that many of the people who are liquid asset poor are also income poor, what may be more surprising is how far up into the income scale the financial vulnerability really reaches. So 27%, more than a quarter of households in California that earn between about $60,000 and $100,000, these are people who are in the middle class, don't have 3 months worth of savings. They don't have this basic personal safety net. So if you're trying to make a case to a policymaker, for example, who has constituents that policymaker might care about low-income people, but also has some middle-income constituents that turn out to vote, this is the kind of data that you could use to really indicate that this is not a niche problem. This is a problem that that a lot of people face. So why are so many people living on the edge of financial insecurity? Well, certainly the recession and its continued impact is a big part of the reason. We know that unemployment continues to be a big issue here in California. The data on the chart is from the scorecard and is annual data for 2011. You can see that California was second to worst in the country. And while that rate has come down across the country, the relative positions of states haven't really moved much. So right now, the latest data show that California is tied for third worst at 9.4%. And so it's like everybody's coming down a little bit, but things are still pretty rough here in California. And you could easily, in making this case, go get county level data, which I know in many places is going to be higher than the statewide data. So part of the reason people are living on the edge is that there are no jobs to be had. But the other part of the reason is that many people lack even the basic tools to save for a rainy day. And so here in California, 1 in 4 households doesn't have a savings account. So if you don't have a savings account, where are you going to put those emergency funds? In the can in the backyard, under your mattress? You know, it's a basic tool, and a lot of people don't even have it, which really speaks to the importance of connecting people to the financial mainstream. And we know that about 8% of people in California don't have any kind of account. They don't have a checking account. They don't have any kind of account. So you got a question.
This is California or national?
This is California, so 28% of people in California don't have a savings account. So how are people getting by? They've got little savings, and so what are they doing? They're taking on debt in order to make their household budget work. So the average household in California is carrying around more than $13,000 of credit card debt, and this is about $3,000 higher than the national average. California ranks 48th out of 51. States and the District of Columbia. So this is a big deal. Debt is a big problem. Unfortunately, more than half of consumers in California don't have prime credit scores. They have subprime credit scores, which means that if they do need credit, they've got to turn to high-cost or predatory lenders in order to, again, make it through another week. And in fact, we know that of the folks who do have mainstream bank accounts, 1 in 5 households are what we would call underbanked, which means that they have an account, but they're still using high-cost financial services in order to make it through. So which does really underscores the point that people, they need credit, they need access to some kind of credit, and if all that's available is something predatory, then they're in pretty rough shape. So, faced with limited savings, high debt, bad credit, the opportunity to build long-term assets is really at reach. And these data are actually national. So nationally, we can see that net worth declined by more than $27,000 since its peak in 2006. Home ownership nationally declined to about 65% since its peak in 2006. And certainly there are a lot of reasons for the decline in home ownership, but obviously foreclosure is a big part of that. Foreclosures are down since their peak in 2010, but our data is from second quarter of 2012, and the foreclosure rate nationally was 4.27%, which is still well above the pre-crash rate, which was less than 1%. So we have a long way to go. On the small business ownership side, we saw that small business ownership declined slightly as well, and it moved in tandem with the lack of availability of business capital. One interesting thing on the business ownership piece is that micro businesses, and so we define those as businesses with fewer than 5 employees, that micro business ownership actually increased slightly. And we can't say for certain why that's so, but one reasonable explanation is that, faced with laid off workers who can't find a job, they turn self-employment into a job creation strategy. So housing and homeownership in California, this is probably not a new graph to you in a way. Compared to the national average of around 65% homeownership, in California the homeownership rate is a full 10 percentage points below that, about 55%. So, that may not be new, but what may be new is really pointing out the affordability of homes. And this may be more true in the Bay Area and in Los Angeles than it is in parts of the Central Valley. But at least at the state level, you can see that that homeownership is 6 times median income in the state of California, compared to a national average of median home values being about 3.5 times home value. It's twice that in California. So homeownership is really out of reach for a lot of people. The people who do get into homes, unfortunately, are paying a lot more of their income than they really should be to pay for those homes. So about half of homeowners are spending more than 1/3 of their income on their housing expenses. And unfortunately, the situation is even worse for renters. So 58% of renters in California are spending more than 1/3 of their income on those costs. So those numbers are pretty disturbing by themselves, and yet as troubling as they are, they are completely dwarfed by the financial insecurity of households of color. So what we know is that 51% of households of color are liquid asset poor, compared to 31% of white households. And white households are also considerably more likely to own assets. So the gap in the net worth between white households and households of color is pretty striking. And if we look at home ownership, it's the same issue. So 64%, excuse me, of white households are homeowners, where only 45% of households of color own that asset. So that's sort of the big story in terms of how families are faring in California. There's a couple of other indicators that I just want to share with you, so you have them in your back pocket in case it's something that you want to work into your pitch. The first one is around uninsurance. So here in California, 1 in 5 individuals is uninsured. And then the other one is around education, where we've got challenges pretty much at whatever grade level you're talking about. So this is a graph that is very busy, number one. But in addition to that, it's showing 8th grade proficiency in math and reading. And you can see that California is down here at the bottom, with only about 1 in 4 8th graders who are proficient in math and reading. When we look at high school degrees, again, California is down at the bottom, and we are supposed to be leaders in this country. Not so in all cases. And then if we look at 4-year degree by race, although overall we have a pretty good college attainment rate in California, if you look at the disparity between adults of color and white adults, you can see that California is in the bottom 10. So, pretty grim, right? I just put a downer on this this whole day, and your one reaction would be to throw up your hands and say, I'm going to go to the movies and not think about this right now. But we don't stop there. We need to provide a solution, right? And it's the solution that we like to talk about is they're recognizing that a lot of people are financially vulnerable. What do we do that? We get them on a path that is not maybe homeownership tomorrow, but it's a path that leads there, and you can connect where people are today, which we've just seen, to where we want them to go. In general, the approach to providing solutions is that you want to, number one, name and validate what the person you're trying to persuade is already doing, to make sure that they feel like they are already contributing. But then what you want to do is sort of connect the dots from what that person is already doing to what they could be doing. And again, this is true for if you're talking to a funder, if you're talking to a policymaker, if you're talking to your boss. It's not to say, let's throw out what we're doing right now, but instead let's just sort of build on that. And it seems to, you get a more positive response that way. So one way that we do that is to talk about what we call a household financial security framework. And CFED developed this to really describe that path from financial insecurity to economic opportunity. And I'm going to show you the framework in a minute, but I just want to say a little bit about it first. And so what it does is really try to do that naming and validation of where your audience is. And it's sort of flexible enough so that everybody can find themselves in it in a way, and then they can sort of connect to what you want them to do. So it starts with where most anti-poverty folks start, which is about meeting today's needs, basic financial stability, making sure people have a home, making sure they have a job, that kind of thing. But it also really highlights the importance of connecting people to the financial mainstream, ensuring that they have the tools and the incentives and supports that will enable them to save and build assets, and also the importance of protecting people from predatory practices and the loss of income and or assets. So let's walk through the framework. It has 5 elements: learn financial skills and build human capital, earn income and benefits, save for emergencies and the future, invest in assets to generate wealth and income, and protect the gains that are made through insurance and by avoiding predatory practices. And I just want to walk through briefly what we mean by each one of these boxes. I want to start in the middle and start with this earn box. So when we're talking about income, we're really talking about 3 things. We're talking about wage income, if you had any business or investment income, and public benefits. Those are your 3 sources of income. And your ability to maximize that income is going to depend on a number of factors. One is having access to basic goods and services. So do you have stable housing? Do you have a car that will allow you to get to that job that will bring in that income? Having quality business or job opportunities. So in some parts of California, with high unemployment rates, the job opportunities aren't there. So that's going to really stand in the way of being able to maximize that income. Access to public benefits. Do you know how to get those benefits? Are you actually receiving what's available in your community? The assets you already own are going to influence your earning potential, your human capital that you might have developed through post-secondary education or training, as well as the knowledge and skills that are related to not just accessing public benefits, but once you're on the job, how do you navigate those employee benefits? Are you taking advantage of direct deposit, for example, or retirement savings, match savings? Moving on, savings is really just what's left over after you pay for your day-to-day basic consumption and you pay off any debts that you have. And so your ability to save is going to depend on the affordability of basic goods and services, your ability to reduce your debts, and access to appropriate and affordable financial products. So if you're spending all your money paying for housing, as we just saw, 58% of renters are doing in California, or paying off credit card bills, or you're paying the fees to predatory lenders, there's not going to be a whole lot left over to save. So getting all of those things under control is a way to facilitate savings. Equally important to savings are these financial structures that make savings easy. So direct deposit is one example of that, where you make a decision to save once, and you don't have to make it again. You don't have to make it every time you get your paycheck. So just sort of thinking about what are ways that we can make savings easy are going to help people move along this path. So then with some savings put away for emergencies or for the future, and with the right tools and the right incentives and support, people can start to parlay some of that savings into assets that then generate wealth and income. I forgot. Here we go. The iterative path. That's what that ellipse is about. So certainly the ability to build assets is going to be dependent on the price of an asset. So in parts of California where homeownership is very expensive, that may not be the asset that a person is going to first get into. That may come later. Access to financing. Can you get a mortgage? Can you get a student loan? These are determinants of whether you can build assets. Public incentives. These can be things like tax-free retirement savings as an incentive to start saving for the future, but also things like first-time homeownership, down payment assistance, for example. And then the knowledge and skills that you have related to purchasing a specific asset. So having the training about how do you fill out a student aid form is really critical to being able to access that good financing that you need to get an asset. The learn box across the top, you can see it spans of those 3 middle categories, and that's really meant to convey the importance of both human capital, K-12 education, post-secondary education, as well as having the skills to navigate the financial marketplace. And that shows up, those need to have that information shows up at all along the pathway. And similarly, the need to protect gains that you've made is something that also shows up all along the pathway. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Kate now, and what she's going to do is to make this a little bit more concrete for everybody, to give some concrete examples of what we're talking about in each of these boxes. Thanks, Jen.
In regard to the income, is your model directed to try to maximize the benefits of what a person is making currently, but not necessarily, I know you have the other one where you invest to generate more income, but what about improving the earning power of the individual by the job, the training, the skills the person has? Is that something you get into?
Well, I think that's definitely part of the model and the framework for what people need to be financially secure. And it can, you can decide where you want to put it, but it's in that learn box about stressing the importance of basic K through 12 education, but also the post-secondary skills training and post-secondary college, for example, would fit into that learn box as a critical input in order to move people.
Is this PowerPoint going to be available to us?
Yes.
Send it out
Yeah.
Great. So, great. Really interesting theoretical framework. But what does it mean in terms of the actual services that we provide, right? So that's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about today. And many of you are already doing a lot of this. So if we talk about this Learn Box, who is already doing something that fits in this Learn Box? What is it? I've heard many of you talk about this. Yes, go ahead.
Well, because talk about financials, also we're already doing the financial literacy, teaching about budget, reduce credit.
Right, right. So the financial education, the financial literacy work, right? Others want to chime into other pieces of that? Yes.
We're actually doing the financial education and counseling work and some, and then, with the Access and Opportunity group that we just started with mutual housing, working in that direction, but we also do K through 12 education attainment.
Right.
Type stuff with a reading program and some health and housing living.
Great. Good. Good. Yes.
We do K through 12 as well, education with post-secondary education as well, or certified training, truck driver training, things like that, to get advanced skills.
Good. Great. And I heard some other folks talk about other types of more job-specific types of trainings that are happening as well. So that's what we would put here in that Learn Box. Earn. What are folks doing already that you think fits into this Earn Box in terms of types of strategies or products and services that you're providing?
I think microenterprise provides a way, as you mentioned, that people that are laid off, a lot of times are going into self-employment to bring in, or even people with work that are underemployed have a second cottage industry or something on the side in order to increase money into the household.
Right, so you're providing investments to help people.
So yeah, we
Cluster, right? Good, good. So that can fit. Some folks will put that in the Earn Box, and some people will put that in the Invest Box. But I think it's nonetheless an important strategy for us to talk about. Where it fits.
Maybe non-income credit to help your family
Okay,
get some of their funds and non-income.
Right, exactly. So helping people in terms of access to VITA services and the Earned Income Tax Credit, absolutely. Absolutely. Are any of you doing help in terms of connecting people to public benefits for which they are eligible? Rental assistance, utilities assistance, things like that? Yeah, great, great.
What about workforce development?
All of the connection to the job market, the folks from the Madera Workforce Development Council, I would assume that you guys are doing a lot of stuff that would fit in that box.
We do a business service unit that has the partnerships and relationships with businesses in our community and can refer our clients to them and work specifically for them. And then we also provide benefits planning guidance to beneficiaries who receive SSI and SSDI who would like to return to work, and how does that look like when they return to work, and how their earnings then may impact their benefits, and at what point would they start losing their benefits to become, financially stable.
Really critical piece of the conversation. So, yes.
On our side, obviously, employment training is very important, but that's besides employment training, our clients are provided with some sort of supportive services as they go along through the training.
Okay, great, good. Yes?
We've been helping people with the down payment assistance program. It's a public benefits for the city.
Okay.
And it assists them with the down payment, and we also teach them how to get their credit scores right for their down payment assistance program.
So great. And you know, I think it's sometimes really shocking, sort of the statistics that you see about the benefits for which people are eligible, that they're not taking up, right? And so the work that we can do to really connect people to those benefits and then ultimately helping them to move off of those things as they become more financially secure and stable.
Actually, you know, and one of those we can articulate is the VITA program, the voluntary income tax assistance program, simply because I think there's some statistic that there's 15% of the people who are eligible for EITC actually get it. And it's like the government's largest anti-poverty program. And so if there's an opportunity to get the word out for that, and that actually increases the earnings of those folks.
How many folks here are doing any sort of connection to VITA or EITC promotion? Great, good. If you're not, talk to those folks. There's a lot of services out there to help connect people to that EITC and people are leaving money on the table if they're not accessing it. Great. So what about that next box, save? What are folks, I heard many of you talk about different ways that you're connecting people to savings accounts.
Our earned escrow accounts.
Yeah. Great, yeah. Yes?
Just a philosophical dilemma that organizations will face from time to time, and that is obviously we want people to take advantage of public benefits, but on the other hand, if you want to develop the independence of a person and not be dependent on public assistance, how do you encourage a person, how do you motivate a person to be, a lot of people want to be proud of what they are accomplishing in their lives. And so it's a balancing act, and hopefully we encourage people not to depend on public benefits if they are capable, because there are some people that need the benefits that are not physically in a condition to, Anyway, it's a philosophical question that because you start wondering will all those programs contribute to the poverty we have, because people don't go beyond a certain level.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important philosophical question, lots of heads nodding around it, definitely. And I think too, there's the element of people, these statistics about people not taking benefits for which they're eligible sometimes is also a pride factor. I don't want to be that person who takes those benefits. And it is a very difficult sort of pathway too. You just mentioned that you're talking with people on SSI and SSDI, and how do you move on that pathway?
And you have to sit down with them visually. I've noticed that with beneficiaries that we work with, we have to show them the total financial outcome that they will be receiving. And it's a slow process to get them to change their thought process, because they've been dependent on these benefits for such a long time. And they may initially come in and feel like, I can't even get enough time. And that's fine, but it's a process that we're going to walk through. And as they start to earn, and they start to see the total financial package, they're more likely to work with us to become self-sufficient, because they may be losing $866 that they've been dependent on for such a long time, but if they start to earn, they're earning what they're making per month in addition to whatever is left on their disability benefits, and that results in much more than what their cash check would have been.
That education piece. And we've seen people as well in the savings field that particularly if they're TANF recipients, really it's hard to convince them to walk down a pathway of starting to save because of their fear of losing that benefit. Yes.
Is there anyone here that, have examples of how they work with their local human services agency? Because we're talking about savings, and there's a certain amount of assets that families can accumulate when they're on assistance. And we've seen it where, families don't move to that next level just because, they can't, and they're sort of stuck in a sense. But how do we, create a safety net for them so that they can move beyond that? I don't know if anyone here has that.
So we have some examples to share.
Well, so this is the question of asset limits on public benefit programs, and it goes really to the theoretical conundrum of ideally, we want to encourage people to be as self-sufficient as they can, and at the same time, we recognize that social supports are there for just that, for supports, that we want people to take advantage of those, and that the key is to design our social supports in a way that encourages people to move along the path rather than traps them. So in the disability program at the federal level, the asset tests are, $2,000 or $3,000. And that sends a really strong signal that you shouldn't be saving. My sister's on SSI and she's like, no, I can't have a bank account, which is totally not true. I mean, so there's a lot of misinformation out there. But it's where public policy comes into. At the state level, decisions around temporary assistance for needy families or CalWORKs, for Medicaid, and food stamps, these are all decisions that California can make about how does it want to structure its program so that people can start to save, build a personal safety net so that they can move their way off the program. And they can't be scared of like, oh God, if I take this job or if I start saving, I'm going to stop getting that, whatever, how many $100s a month, and that's this huge disincentive to save. So we've got to fix that. And this is something we'll talk about in workshop number 3 when we start to look outward a little bit about what is it that we can do together as a coalition that maybe we can't do by ourselves. And one of those things is changing policies and raising up our voices and talking about the fact that these asset limits and public benefit programs send this really unintentional signal that keeps people dependent rather than fostering their independence. You struggle with that, on a day-to-day basis of how to help people navigate that. I mean, what you can do is make sure they know the rules, make sure you know what the exceptions are, put their money in kinds of accounts that are protected and excluded from those resource tests. So in the short term, you can work with people on that kind of basis, but then there is a larger policy question that we hope everybody engages.
So, saving strategies is our next piece on the household financial security framework. What are some products or services besides, we've got the escrow accounts within the housing authority, other types of savings strategies that you're pursuing? IDAs. Is everybody here familiar with an IDA? No? So an individual development account is a matched savings account. So where an individual commits to saving a certain amount on a fairly regular basis, and those savings are matched, sometimes dollar to dollar, and sometimes at greater amounts, 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1 even. And it's usually in pursuit of a specific type of use. So most often used for the down payment for a home, used for investment in education or job training, used for investment in small business capitalization, and some other uses, I'm sure. So those are individual development accounts or a type of savings product that is often exempt from asset limits, which makes them a nice piece. Along with that, children's savings accounts. So accounts that are set up for kids that can be used post-high school graduation for any type of post-secondary training or education. And those are usually also matched accounts. Yes?
If you have individuals that receive disability benefits, Social Security has a work incentive or employment support that is called a PAC plan, and it allows them to set aside, parts of their paycheck every month so that they can eventually buy a home, buy vehicle, and again, it's not used into their benefits calculation at the end of the month.
Great. So here we have the match savings program. There's also, all sorts of work that can be done that really is just about helping people to access mainstream financial products. I know somebody was speaking about the education that they do to really help people understand what financial products are available and what's appropriate for them. And here I think it's really important for us to think carefully about what are appropriate and accessible financial products. If you're working with people that can't get to a mainstream bank during normal banking hours, what's the type of product that they can access that allows them to get customer service in the hours in which they need it, as an example, right? There are lots of things for us to think through in terms of the clients that we're serving and thinking through what are the products that are not only not predatory and priced appropriately, but also are accessible and helps them meet those needs, financial needs that they have. The next box is around invest. So what are the types of strategies that you all are employing that help with this invest piece? Jeremy, you spoke about small business capitalization that you help with, and that's certainly one example. Other pieces?
There's equity investments too that can go on. IDAs can actually be looked at that way as equity investments.
Sure, absolutely. IDEA's helping in terms of these investments too. What's another piece? So before somebody can invest in terms of getting for example, a mortgage or things like that, there's often a critical piece people need to address first. Home buyer education, absolutely. What happens if their credit's bad? Right? Right. It's often a really important first step. Is that piece to make sure that they actually are able to access some of those investment opportunities to address their credit. Some credit counseling there. First time home buyer programs, small business development. And then the last box is protect. So once people have started to build up these assets in their lives, what is it that we can do to help them really protect those assets and ensure their longevity? People fit some of the things that you're doing into that protect box. Yeah. So if you didn't hear that, the foreclosure prevention piece, absolutely, and certainly has been critically important over the last few years to ratchet up those services, certainly.
Well, within your financial literacy classes, you integrate the classes on insurance, private insurance.
Great, so information and education around insurance products and why they're needed and how to navigate the realm of available products that are out there. Great. Good. And then I would add, in addition to that, sort of additional information that helps people navigate that wealth of financial products that are out there, many of which that are predatory, help them have the information that they need to do a better job of choosing the products that are right and avoiding things that are more predatory that would chip away at those assets that they're building, right? So anything that you can do that really helps inform clients about the hazards of high-cost financial products and help them navigate that world will certainly help them in terms of protecting their assets. So we're going to return to this again and again, right? This is a whole wealth of asset building strategies, and certainly no one organization will be doing every single one of these things, right? I think all of you can identify with some piece of this in a really important and critical way. And so what we want to do next, as we start to get into lunch, yes, Margaret.
Just curious, where would like retirement accounts, saving for retirement, where would that fit? Would that be saving or investing or protecting or kind of everywhere?
I would personally put it under savings. Would you agree with that?
In this case, I would probably put it under invest, because it is the asset in the end. And again, all of these, if you ask 5 people at CFED to put things in boxes, they would come up with 5 different answers.
Right, exactly,
And so it doesn't really, you can decide where it makes sense for you, but the point is it's sort of a conceptual framework to help you think about all of those things and put them somewhere.
Right.
So save, invest, somewhere in there.
Yeah. It's on the screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something that might be useful to know is when is a certification or permit or license or required? Like, I know you can't be given a lot of investment advice without having a certain certification. The same is certain areas of credit counseling. So at some point, if you could share that with us, because I'm not really aware exactly where the lines are drawn for that type of requirement.
Wow, that's a great question. And I think you've drawn 2 important ones right around sort of investment and credit counseling. I know that there are some certifications around financial counseling and coaching, but they're certainly not yet, I think, seen in the same light as the credit counseling certification and the investment certification. Others have experience in terms of where you would, it ultimately comes down to who do you think is a quality provider that you would want to connect your clients to, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about referrals and how do you build robust referrals that are quality in the next workshop. So let me think more on your question and make sure we talk about it next time. Others have things to add to that? Good. So because we know that none of you are going to embrace every single one of these strategies and be able to do them directly yourselves, this idea of making the case and thinking really deeply about which of these services are the ones that your organization should really be providing to your clients, and which services are things that you want to refer out to, and which are things that you sort of say, well, that's not for us today, or that's not as important for our clients. The exercises that we want to do today are really kind of taking us on a pathway of thinking through that issue. So we're going to work on an exercise. I'm going to hand it out now. And you can feel free to kind of work on this over lunch and chat with your neighbors and people that are doing similar things. But this is really kind of the first step in terms of making a case. So all of you have kind of come today here with a different sort of set of experiences. You're doing different things within your organizations. And you may or may not be interested in expanding upon the work you're doing, or improving upon it, adding a new type of service. And the first thing that you'll need to do is really make the case for why you should be going down that pathway. The ask that you want to make. So it could be anything from, I want to ask my board of directors to authorize a planning committee for us to investigate adding credit counseling to our list of services. Let's get regrouped a little bit here. Did everybody enjoy your lunch? Okay, great. Good. All right, so I would love to kind of hear a little bit about people's experiences in terms of using this template as a tool as you think about what it is that you want to be doing within your own organizations and how you want to make the case for what you want to do. So I'd love some brave volunteers. I have a couple of questions here in terms of what your ask was and who the audience is that you're making an ask of. Where did you have an easy time of finding the data, what pieces of data that best connected to what your audience really cares about? Where did you have any trouble? So we can help maybe collectively troubleshoot things that people struggled with, and what further information that you needed. So who's willing to kind of share a little bit of their experiences in terms of the types of things you were writing down on your template? Do I have any volunteers? Jen?
I'm always volunteering.
All right.
I have no row. Okay. Actually, this fits right in with how much work is it?
Oh, sort of go through those questions maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, this is really timely because I've been checking my phone a lot and on the phone a lot because we're getting ready to talk to a particular credit union in our area that we've had trouble kind of pushing. But they've recently, through just chipping away at them over the last year, I think they might be coming to a possible real partnership with us. And so our ask in our audience. Our ask is to do two things. One, we need support financially. I work for a United Way. We're used to asking people for a lot of things. They're needing money. And so one of the things that we're looking at is that not only do people want to give money, but they also want to give their talent. And people also incorporating financial institutions or other organizations. They want to be a part of the movement. And so as we're reshaping our ask going into this next campaign season, and also working in the impact side, I don't ask for money, I just ask for help and spend money. What we're going to do with this particular credit union is acknowledge, one, that they're already working in the financial education arena. We know already that they have a youth focus, that they're really, they have an incredible curriculum for youth, but they don't share it.
We have an incredible youth IDA program that doesn't have enough financial education in it from actual financial institutions. We have asked this institution before to be a host for an IDA program, and as you know, if you were working in those are high transaction accounts, and not a lot of financial institutions are willing to do that. And so we'll get there one day, but we're not going to ask them for that today. They're not ready. What they are ready for is most likely to do the financial education portion and also give us a little sponsorship dollars so we can expand the program. And in return, what they get is exercising their member education services, which they have a big team in Sacramento, and then also some community recognition for their hard work. So they'll get to see those outcomes. They're very outcomes driven. So our ask are those things in our audience is the financial institution? Which pieces of data best connected to what your audience cared about? They want to know how many people we're currently serving, how they're getting served, and what our outcomes currently are. And not just what they are right now, but what do we expect them to be? Because we have a program that's only about 2 years old, so we're still really exercising and cleaning off the dust. We're learning things every day about the foster youth program. So we're going to be very honest with them because that's their expectation. And so we're going to tell them how many kids we have in the program right now, how many kids actually attain the IDA, and then what they use it for. We just graduated one person recently from the IDA program. The rest should be graduating over the summer. That started in that first cohort. So we'll be able to give them more data, but we want them to not only worry about what we've done so far, but how they might be a part of improving the success ongoing. Where do you have trouble connecting with your audience? Well, you know what? They have actually, it's been a really interesting thing because their president sits on our board. We, in Sacramento, we don't have a lot of corporations who are headed out of Sacramento. Most of them are headed, especially financial institutions, are in San Francisco, as you know. And so we have the luxury of having this person actually be the president. It's a California credit union, and she sits on our board, but we haven't connected with her for some reason yet. And so what we've been doing is chipping away a little bit at all of our contacts. I have the fortunate position to be working with their actual financial educators, so I've been chipping away at them little by little. Our resource development folks were chipping away at the person who runs their campaign internally a little bit, but we all got together and had the same message. If we had 10 different messages coming at them, we might not have gotten another opportunity that we're all working on desperately to get done by Thursday. What further information did you need? You know, it's interesting because I like that question because it really does make you stop and think. One, we already have their contact names, we have a basic understanding of their work, and we've already been partners somehow with them. We have their ear, a certain number of them. And then we also know how they can relate to the intersections of our work. But what we haven't done is develop the relationship I think that they require to feel comfortable. We have one credit union that is just jumped in completely, you know, and they're right there in the work with us. This one has been really slow going. We've been nursing their relationship to get them on Bank On for about 2 years. And I've been around for about a year with this United Way. And also, I'm not sure I fully understand what their goal is for their reach. You know, what did they see their program doing? You know, they're asking me a lot about my program, but I really want to see what their program, where they think, what outcomes they want to see for the people who they're already educating who aren't necessarily affiliated with ours. And then maybe we have some doors we can open for them. Hopefully that's where we'll go. And you know, our big mantra is usually people that we're working with, the answer is no to them in a mainstream situation. No, you can't have a car loan. No, you can't have a house loan. No, you can't have a bank account in some circumstances. And no, I won't cash that check. And no, right? And then all the predatory practices, all the predatory lenders will say yes. And every time you walk into a payday lender, the answer is yes. Every time you walk into a for-profit tax preparer, the answer is yes. And so what we want to do is help create yes for our clients that actually keeps their money safe. And so we're going to appeal to our credit unions are inherently community-minded, so we're going to appeal to that side of them.
Thank you, Janice. That
That was a really, I think, really interesting example of making a case in a way to find a partnership that leads to, more services to the population you're serving. That's really interesting. Another example, someone's willing to share. Tell us about your experiences in working with this template and what your ask might be. About how much people you want to.
Come on, brave souls.
Brave souls.
Are we gonna have to start calling on people,
Okay, housing authority, yes? Want to tell us what you thought about?
Really a little different, because I don't think we have trouble getting our board or our staff, but it really is getting residents to participate and engage. So I was thinking of it more from the resident and participation. So I think our ask would be, we would be asking our audience to commit to learning about financial security. And I wouldn't even use education in it, just learning about what financial security is. Which pieces of data best connect to what our audience cared about. I think our audience is really scared about losing their safety net. And so really educating them, it was twofold, not only their safety net, but also the education data. How is this affecting your children? Because they don't want their children to be living in the same circumstances, or they want something better. So connecting both the safety net, or eliminating that fear of the safety net going away, and then also how this can benefit their children potentially. Where do you have trouble connecting to what your audience cares about? I think a lot of times you don't listen as a service provider. You're so worried about implementing the programs or what you're having to do that you don't take a step back. And so teaching staff or talking to staff about connecting in the sense of what is that real fear? It's not just that they don't want to go get a job or that they're not interested in financial security, but what is that, is it, I don't have enough to buy bread at the end of the month and you want me to be thinking about this other stuff. So once you identify that, and if you can provide the resources to get them through, then maybe they can think about financial security. And so what further information did you need is identifying what are the top 5 or 10 issues as they relate to basic needs. And then identifying whether the resources available for you to partner with in the community or creating resources of your own. I know for us, we've established our nonprofit foundation. That gives us a little more flexibility in going after community resources so that we know if we need to develop a food pantry, if we need clothing to help families with that, before the start of the school year, we can eliminate some of those worries that they have, and then maybe that can get them thinking in terms of other resources for themselves.
That's great. Thank you. And we'll get into some of that conversation around thinking about the delivery of the services in the next workshop, so it's a great tee up for it. So we've got a great example of making the case for a client audience and for an external partner audience. Did anybody do something that was more internally focused within your organization to other staff within your organization? Mostly externally focused?
I think actually we'll be using this tool to get our RD staff to deepen their knowledge and understanding about why asset development is so important, and it's not just the area of income or financial education classes.
That's great. That's great. Yes?
I think for us, internally, yes.
Okay.
To answer your question.
Okay, great. Tell me more about what you did. Do you want to stand up and tell us all?
What was your ask, or your audience? Our audience would be our board of directors, and definitely, our executive director, she's already wanting to move into financial and economic success. Of course, that's where VITA came in, and then we partnered with organizations to do, financial education classes, but we really want to take it to that next level. And so that would be, my audience would be our executive director and our board of directors to see if they can approve
for us, and it is perfect timing because we're actually looking at a logic model right now. So it's perfect timing. And we do bits and pieces of this, but then I like how you gave us this framework because it will really help me sell it to them in a sense. In addition to just internal organization, but really looking at the systems, the directors of the systems as well. Which pieces of data best connect? I think really the goal for our agency is to decrease generational poverty. And so I would like to use the education data for that, in addition to a lot of the other scorecard examples that you have here. Where did you have trouble connecting to what I was about? I didn't feel like I had trouble connecting just because this for the last, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 years. We've done VITA for the last 10 years, but definitely for the last 4 to 5 years, we've been really moving to, instead of just working through system change, we've been really wanting to move families, into self-sufficiency. And so I think this is something that has already been on everyone's mind. It's just a matter of, where do we go from here? So, further information that you need. I think it's just, I don't know what further information I need to, I don't think I got to that part.
Yeah, until you get those tough questions. Good, thank you for sharing that. Great. So I think 3 great examples of different ways that you would need to be making the case and the type of work that you're doing, or what to be doing more of. So we're going to move now and sort of into the next sort of step in the process. You've kind of made the case and gotten people excited. I've used some data to really help foster that excitement and gotten people excited about what you could do. But then you're faced with this whole array of asset building strategies, right, that we talked about before lunch. And this isn't even exhaustive. We've named other things as well that fit into that financial security framework, different strategies that you're already using, things that you may have heard from others that suddenly piqued your interest and some things you could be offering to your clients. So how is it that you start to whittle down among this array of possibilities and say, what's really important for me to be offering to my clients today? And before we get into even just the how of how you'll do it, which is what we'll talk about next month, thinking logically through, and logic models are one way to do that, logically through what makes the best sense for your organization has to do with what are the types of outcomes people really care about. Right? So any one of these asset building strategies will lead to a series of outcomes, or we sometimes call them financial milestones. Okay? So in trying to determine what are the most appropriate asset building strategies for your organization to focus on, the place that we would recommend starting is from what are the outcomes that matter, right? We've got a set of outcomes as an organization, right? We have an organizational mission. We probably have a strategic plan that has certain outcomes that we're looking at. How do these asset building strategies contribute to the achieving of those outcomes that you need to achieve as an organization or within a discrete program within the organization? So if we look at any one of those asset building strategies, it's important to think about what, if I apply that asset building strategy to my client population, what do we get out of that, right? What's the milestones that our clients achieve by virtue of providing that service? So let's do a little brainstorming here. I've picked out 6 different asset building strategies for us to talk about, just by way of example. So if you are providing, let's say, financial education and counseling, what effect does that have on your clients? What are some things that you can measure in terms of what that brings to your clients and the ways that they change their behavior around financial management or financial stability?
based on the presentation that you did.
Okay.
And then your follow-ups.
Okay.
Your follow-ups, either individual or as a group.
Okay.
Following up on, once they've opened, if they decided to open a checking account, have a follow-up course where how to balance a statement, you know, he wants how to balance their statement, not just the generic example.
Right, that's great. So in terms of the how to do it, if you're doing sort of before and after the education, the intervention testing, the range of knowledge, but you had two really good examples. One was, establishing a budget and following it, right, and establishing a bank account, right? These are things that you are training on. Have they actually done those things, right? Right? So, you know, the percentage of people that opened a bank account at a mainstream financial institution could be one milestone that you would measure as a result of financial education and counseling. Other ideas, other things people are measuring around financial education and counseling? Yes.
We do an actual worksheet on income to debt ratio, or income to expense ratio, not debt necessarily, but expense ratio, just to see if some things have changed there. When we take a snapshot of those all.
Great, so how have they actually changed their spending patterns against their income? Yeah. That's great. Good. Any other examples? Those are good ones, right? The sort of things that you can think about. What am I actually doing in this intervention, and how does that actually, what do we want to be seeing change in terms of the way people approach their financial management when it comes to financial education? I know we've got folks in here who are experts around credit counseling and debt management. What are some of the things that you are measuring around financial milestones?
Credit scores, reduction in debt, percentages over time.
Great, so changes in credit scores, and changes in, how do you measure the debt piece? Is it like a debt to income ratio?
Well, not debt to income, but just overall common debt over a certain period of time.
Okay.
I mean, you do all that, right, just, we have statistics on debt reduction, but just how quickly we manage to do it over time versus their income, all sorts of millions of milestones we look at.
Good, great, good. And for those of you that do free tax prep and access to the earned income tax credit, what are some things that you measure as a result of that work? Go ahead.
Well, we measure the amount of the number of people that came in for our services, but we also measure the dollar amount that the income tax credit that comes back into the community.
Good. So the number of people who have actually accessed the VITA service and the number of dollars that have been given out in EITC.
Something that we tried this year that we hadn't done in the past is that we've also been trying to measure how many of these people are for the first time using the VITA services, and how many of those in the past have gone through the process of the refund anticipation loan instead of using the VITA services. And so we've been working with the Housing Authority to create the awareness for especially people that get out of using that predatory practice and access these free services. And so that's something that we tried this year, and we're still working on trying to analyze that data.
That's great. Good. So it's just part of the intake process. You asked what their previous experiences have been around the tax prep and track that. That's great. Good. Yes?
Just wondering if they're also looking at how much of the tax refunds being served.
Right, exactly. So there's an opportunity there, right? When someone actually receives that large amount back to them in the tax refund, what are they doing with that? And is it being channeled into a savings account or some other investment?
We also look at, the number of families and also the dollar amount of families that are back in tax compliance.
Oh, okay.
Because,
yeah. I mean, that actually doesn't matter, the legal situation of not, being in compliance. That's great.
I would say on the credit counseling, debt management, if you get the refund because of the earned income tax, put it into paying credit card with a very high interest.
Right? How have they used that to not, if it's not going into a savings account, is it being used to help pay down debt, particularly high interest debt? That's great.
We've actually used VITA sites to do just a general poll, like, do you have an account Do you have any kind of bank account? If you do, then you can get a direct deposit. If you don't, you can step over there and get an account with, with the bank on program.
Yeah.
And we've done, and that's really interesting, because you can see actually the whole demographic of the person who's coming in for a FICA.
Yeah, that's great. It's really
And not
interesting.
only that, but something also that we did this year is we, in that intake, initial intake, we asked them, are your kids insured? And if not, we also service the hub and we send them through to, they have all their documentation there, right?
Right, yeah, there's I think an interesting moment there. We talk a lot about the tax time moment as a savings moment, but you've also got a lot of the services moment as a services moment overall, because you have so much of the information you need there to also qualify for other services. Great, good. So your list is even more extensive than my initial brainstorm list, which is as it should be. But just showing, as we think about which strategies do I want to employ, thinking about how that strategy actually could potentially impact your client population, right? We're going to put all these pieces together at the end of the day, but here's sort of, if you think about financial education and counseling, it's about an ability to set and follow a budget, average monthly, our savings amounts changing. That was a great example of looking at income versus expenses and how that changes over time. Assuming you're counseling around accessing financial products and services in a different way, you can start to track that information as well. Credit counseling and debt management, clearly credit scores being a big one. And then apparently a range of a lot of other data that we can track as well. And free tax prep and the earning tax credit, you had even more examples than I have here in terms of even just the amount of money people spend on tax prep, increasing their income through the tax credit, and what they ultimately do with it. So 3 more for us to brainstorm. So if you're implementing a strategy around access to financial services and helping people to connect to financial institutions and open accounts, what would be some of the things that you might track around the milestones for that strategy? Yes?
I would say access to more credit, or for us it's access to capital.
Okay, so are people able to access capital through these relationship with these financial institutions? Yes.
You know, one of the benefits of financial services frequently for some workers is the ability to cash a check. That a lot of people pay a lot of money when they don't know about the financial services.
Right.
And also the cost of sending money to their country of origin. And that can be a real benefit when you're connected to a financial institution.
Absolutely. So what's the reduction in fees that they're paying?
Right.
Because they have now a relationship with a different financial provider that doesn't charge as much money for those services. Right?
They actually say that there's $40,000 a year, or no, over a lifetime, that a person who doesn't have an account will pay in check cashing services. $40,000 over a lifetime.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
That's another fact and figure you often use in making cases. Great. Yes.
A milestone that we measure is through our IDA program, the clients that come in with a credit score that's not going to get them to be approved for mortgage. So we measure their credit score at the beginning of the program. And so at the end, that milestone, we hit that milestone when they're able to.
Oh, wow. So that you've done enough financial counseling, their credit score is improved, and they're able to actually have the asset purchase. That's great.
Are we talking about community level milestones as well, such as new institutions opened up or ATMs, or because a lot of times these neighborhoods, they don't even have a bank in the neighborhood to even, it's 10 payday lenders but no ATM or bank. So
I think that's a really great point. I think if part of what your organization's program is about having that community level impact and And part of the strategy is about encouraging more financial providers to be responsible financial providers to our community. That's a great milestone. What about in match savings? Several of you are involved in IDA programs. What are some of the milestones that you track around match savings?
Typically what we do is we only actually make the goal, within the set number of months or the time frame that they say, okay, and then how many drop out and how actually. So we do track those sort of things. And then, there are those who change their goals, things like that.
Right.
So we track all of those.
Okay, so the percentage of people who meet not only just savings goals in terms of actual cash saved, but also that used those monies for whatever their goal was around an asset purchase or some other thing. Okay. Other things people track around match savings? One of the things that I really appreciate about individual development account programs is that it helps to create a regular savings behavior. So, if the person doesn't make it all the way to the asset purchase, but they've saved regularly over a period of time and they have an emergency and they have to withdraw their account, I don't know, I see that as a failure because it's really created a pattern of regular savings that they perhaps didn't have before. So tracking sort of monthly savings amounts and regularity in that savings is an important one as well. What about around insurance? I don't know if anybody here was focused heavily on insurance. But if you were doing some sort of strategy that involved helping people get access to insurance, what might be some things that you would track?
Value of their policy.
Yeah, the number of people that enroll, in an appropriate product, we should say. And then, the goal of insurance is really to help us in a time of crisis, right? It's when that crisis hits the family that they're going to have to dip into the savings account or sell off an asset in order to manage that crisis. And so how is the insurance helping to mitigate that and ensure that they can keep that savings in the bank? Yes?
Is that both health insurance and car insurance, or?
We could, I'm being a bit vague here, but.
The important element for insurance is to teach people how to buy insurance. Because there's so much information that it makes it hard for them to tell the difference of what's with the deductibles and all kinds of different ways to buy insurance.
Right.
That's a really important area as far as consumer protection.
Right, absolutely. So we could think about the ways that you're changing behavior around people choosing appropriate products, things that are affordable but also kind of in lines with what their needs are. Absolutely.
And also just that concept of shifting risk away from you personal risk away from you onto an organization that will assume the risk if something happens, so a car accident or something like that. So you're paying something monthly, and that monthly amount is actually lessening your risk if something happens. And so I don't think we always look at that way, especially like renters. We have such a high, a huge amount of people renting. So you think about that risk, what if they have a fire? What if they have, so if you don't have some renter's coverage, then you're assuming all of the risk.
Right, absolutely. Somebody had their hand raised, thank you.
I was going to say that people are afraid, they need to be educated on how to buy insurance just as well as which banking institution to choose.
Right.
Because they don't know how to shop around, they get all confused, and then they don't trust the banks either, because they say I start saving money, and if I don't have the minimum amount, the balance, they charge me, and they need to be educated on both, how to shop for banks and how to shop around for insurance, knowing what getting.
Yeah.
They also need to be educated on the types of insurance that meet their family needs and the value that it brings to them, because they might not need every type of equipment insurance you need, but you need a life insurance policy and what that will do for you versus the home or the renters or the car insurance.
Right.
So it's a different type.
Right. Some things are legally mandated to have and some are not. Right. Absolutely. Great. So you guys have come up with lots of great milestones for us to be thinking about in each of these strategies, right? So around access to financial services, the percentage of people that are opening accounts, the average amounts that are going in and out of the accounts is something that you could feasibly track, and what you're saving in fees. You're having people open up lower cost products, helping people to do that. Under match savings, the percentage that actually open the account, the average savings, monthly savings amounts, as well as what they're ultimately using those savings for in the match accounts. And then with insurance, is it appropriate, and have they avoided a use of predatory products? Particularly, I'm thinking like, if you have an insurance product, does that mean that you avoid going to a payday lender at a time of crisis? Things like that. That you really think about in terms of what are the alternatives in terms of ways that people deal with those crises? Right. Good. So I want to talk about a couple of examples in terms of ways that organizations have thought about what their organizational mission is, how they map that to the outcomes that they want to achieve, and what that means in terms then of then moving into which strategies do they implement, right? How many of you have heard of SparkPoint centers? You don't count. Yes, good. All right. So a SparkPoint Center, for those of you who are less familiar with it, and for those of you who are very familiar with this, please correct me if I'm incorrect in how I characterize this. But a SparkPoint Center is essentially a single location where a person could go and access a range of asset building types of strategies. Now, these centers are actually comprised of several different local nonprofit organizations that have come together at a single location. They've allowed themselves to get rid of their brand when they're in that SparkPoint Center. So they have a single brand, which is the SparkPoint Center. They have a single intake process, where somebody comes in the door, and it doesn't matter if it's a staff person with the United Way, or a credit counseling agency, or the home ownership program. They're all going to do an intake of that person in the same way. And they have a set of shared goals and outcomes that they're working towards. So when a person comes in the door, they can access a pretty wide range of services that are being provided by different nonprofits that have their own niche expertise, but they're all working together towards shared goals. And so these SparkPoint centers were originally started in the Bay Area and have since expanded. There's one right next door. But anybody who's more familiar with SparkPoint centers has more to add in terms of, I'm going to talk you through the sort of outcomes and strategies that are used, but in terms of introducing the concept, anything to add?
It actually came out of a movement with United Way Bay Area for prosperity centers, that sort of thing. And so SparkPoint became the name for the ones that were located in this region. And you're exactly right, everybody kind of drops their hat at the door and they are the community services provider. Some centers have, across the country have now worked out to where they have one prosperity planner and an organization that can virtually attach to all the other organizations, so they're not all located under the same roof. So it's a great concept.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
In the SparkPoint Center, is it just like nonprofit organizations, or does it include, for example, like a local private financial company?
Others that have more experience with SparkPoints, do they have private financial institutions or companies as part of them?
Yeah, they have financial institutions, but no real other profit generating organization. So there are financial institutions to help people open accounts, but like the one next door here, we don't have any other private companies.
But there could also be government agencies. The one in Richmond, for example, is anchored in the human services sector. So I mean, it's not just nonprofit, it can be a government agency.
May I ask why we don't have like financial, like private financial?
I mean, you're saying financial institution, I assume that would be a bank, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But then you don't have, let's say, like a local financial planning.
We do. We have financial planners as well, but they don't charge in there. They donate their time.
They don't charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how are these organizations anchored? They've come together around a single goal or set of outcomes. Their goal is around financial stability and helping individuals achieve financial stability with 4 very clearly defined outcomes. One is around a livable income that reaches the self-sufficiency standard. Is everybody familiar with the self-sufficiency standards? Okay. The second is a good credit score, which they've defined as 650 or higher. The third is having savings in the bank equal to 3 months of living expenses. And the fourth is around a debt income ratio less than 40%. So here they are with a really sort of important goal around financial stability, but they have boiled that down to 4 very concrete measures.
Does that debt include mortgage debt?
I don't know. Yes. I assume it, well, I don't know.
Because if you're renting, then, I mean, you know, it seems like that would include mortgage. Because that's,
Well, rent's not debt.
well, but I'm saying, I mean, if you didn't include it,
We include it.
you do include it in that. So if you're renting and you have 39, then you're
But it's
actually,
an expense, it's still part of your monthly expenses then. Livable, okay.
One important point about all these metrics, part of their intake process, when somebody comes to the door, one of the first things they do is a budget. So this is based on their real expenses, not on theoretical expenses. So unlike, having 3 months worth of savings is like our measure of liquid asset poverty, right? But this is 3 months of savings for their budget. So it tries to really hone in on, do you really have enough for you? And I understand your question about sort of looking at renters and homeowners. You want to be comparing apples to apples and should treat them consistently. But again,
I was just
more
curious.
than I know too. That's great.
Very good question, though. This has come up and has caused hours of debate.
Right.
So, with this as their guide star to say these are the things that we think are the measures of financial stability we should care about, that's what then guided them to say, what are the services that we need to be providing at these Spark Point centers, right? This helped them to really narrow it down. Now, one caveat, this is an organization, or these are types of organizations for whom that overarching organizational mission is financial stability, right? Many of you come from places where you have different organizational missions that may be sort of slightly to the right, left, or center of that, right? If you're working on workforce development, for example, you've got a guide star that starts with getting and retaining jobs, and that's a different starting point. We're going to talk about that in a second. So with this as their starting point, and these metrics is what they care about, they then say, okay, if we want to increase income, then we need to have services that work on job training and placement, that work on continuing education, that have access to the tax prep and get people the tax credit and qualify, and that do the benefit screening so that people can get access to those supports, right? All the things that we talked about. Around enhancing credit and reducing debt, then, they have a series of strategies around financial counseling, workshops, credit and debt management, as well as foreclosure assistance. And then finally, around building up that 3 months of savings, and they will freely admit that this is the hardest one for them to achieve. It's getting access to the actual accounts, so working with bank-ons, getting access to other savings accounts, and then ultimately also connecting to IDAs and other types of first-time homebuyer assistance. So this is sort of a nice example because it's very cut and dry, right? It's very simple, and I mean, it's not the work that they're doing is complex and difficult and good work, but it's simple in that they say financial stability, here's how we define it,
and therefore these are the services that we provide. The bonus of their model is that it brings together organizations with a wealth of different expertise, so that it allows them to have such a diversity of services. Now, the same won't always be true if, for example, you're starting from a very different point, right? So Jen and I worked on, along with some colleagues, worked on a different example, which is when you're starting from a different place. We have an example here, yeah. That's great. So if you are, for example, starting from a place that is of workforce development, I know this is really hard to see, so we've got some handouts here that actually have it on paper, so you can take a look at it. But this is sort of a model that if you're not starting from a place that is, okay, we want to have financial stability and build assets for everyone, but you're starting from more of a niche. I'm sorry. That this is a framework that you can use that ultimately gets you over here to what are the actual asset building services that my organization should be providing. So we start on the left-hand side here with what are the mission-driven outcomes that either your organization or your program really is focused on. And in this case, we used a workforce development example, and un- and underemployed workers need to find and keep jobs that pay a livable wage. So the next piece of that puzzle then is, what are the barriers that my clients face that prevent them from achieving those outcomes? And here we focus on things that are related to finances, right? And so we brainstormed a list here of things. For credit scores, more and more we know that employers are checking credit scores before they'll offer a job, right? A lack of reliable transportation to get to work, right? If you can't get to work reliably every day, then you are going to get fired, and therefore we will not hit our retention goals as a workforce development agency. Lack of reliable childcare, another thing that causes absences at work, right? Or causes people to be late. A lack of a permanent address to give an employer. That will really affect your ability to actually get that job, right? If you get the job but you don't have a bank account, how much of your money are you frittering away to high fees to actually cash that check? And then finally, if you don't have savings for an emergency, like a car repair, or if you don't have enough savings in the bank to even pay for the basic tools that you need to start the job, like a uniform, that really hinders your ability to be successful. So these are just a couple of examples of things that we could think of that are financial barriers that would affect our ability to ultimately be successful around this mission-driven outcome. So then the next step is, all right, those are the things that really are affecting our clients. What do we need to change? What are the outcomes that are really important for us that will get us to fixing these issues? So we mapped that over to, obviously, an improved credit score, if that's the issue. Those middle three can be affected by enrollment in some sort of public assistance or service that will ensure that you have reliable transportation and childcare and some sort of housing assistance. Those last two can also be tracked to opening a bank account and or setting up a direct deposit if that's a possibility within the job that you find the person. And then also tracking savings amounts, right? So if those are the outcomes that you want to focus on, then we move over here to the next step, which is, okay, now I know what services are really important for my clients, right? We need to somehow get them access to credit counseling when there is a poor credit score. We need to do some amount of money management and budgeting training as part of that. There's benefit screening that can be done, as well as some tax prep and EATC work. And then this connection to safe and affordable financial products. And because it's a stylized example, then it very neatly flows back into what you need to do. I know real life can be messier. Does this make sense?
Yes.
You know, it's so interesting because I think this is a great conversation tool because so many people, and I think you mentioned it at the very beginning, you know, we're still a pull yourself up by your bootstraps society in some ways. And there are so many more barriers now than there were so long ago. And you know, this is a great visual to say, this is what folks are going through. It's not just the training for their work. It's actually, they have to have a different kind of foundation than they have, and this is what our organization is doing with this. It's a great visual.
Thanks.
We'll pass that back to our graphic designer.
Yes. I went on vacation and let all So we're going to do a little exercise, surprise, that has you actually map this out for your organization. But I want to just take a minute because to me, I think we all recognize and value the importance of these kinds of mapping exercises and really thinking about outcomes. But you know, it's like that part of a strategic planning process where you get through all the big ideas and everybody's excited about the strategies that you're going to implement. And then you get to the part of where you have to actually write down, like, here are the outcomes that we're going to, what are we going to measure? And everybody loses interest. And it kind of gets, we'll do that later. This is kind of that part of it, right? It's the hard stuff, and yet there's a risk to not doing this, especially when you're in a situation where you've got this type of a mission-driven outcome that you need to get to, and just mapping here isn't always sufficient to get you to here, right? And this is where the case making comes in. And so there are real risks to not actually kind of going through this laborious and tedious process. You can have a risk with your board who may fail to see that these types of asset building strategies are strategically important to reaching those mission-driven outcomes. You may have a problem with funders not seeing that connection between, providing people with reliable housing supports and access to savings accounts, right? And what you're trying to achieve as an organization. And therefore, it'll be hard to drum up the funding unless you can really draw that connection and let them see that this really is core to your mission as an organization. One thing that I actually found recently at a community action agency that we're working with in Seattle, they worked incredibly hard and got everybody from the board to the CEO to the frontline staff all on the same page around what financial capability meant to them as an organization and what the strategies were that they wanted to achieve. And everybody was singing the same song. And then I went in and did a focus group with their program managers. And they were all like, yeah, that's what we said. I got to achieve these outcomes over here, and I don't understand what this stuff has to do with this. And so I can't make time for it in my everyday, and I can't make time to coach my staff on how to do it. They've just fallen down on that whole mid-level piece. And it wasn't that people didn't see that it was important for their clients. It's that they knew that their jobs were around that first outcome, right? Their jobs were here, and nobody had done this mapping for them, and so they couldn't make time for it in their everyday job until they'd really seen that. And frontline staff as well. If you're not making that map for them as well, it's hard for them to make time for it, particularly when we're talking about case management. We've been working with a workforce agency in New York City, and they've just gotten this big new welfare to work contract from the city, and they're really excited about it. And the frontline staff are like, great, if I have time at the end of the half an hour that I have with this client, I will mention the savings product, but it's not core to what I have to do every day, right? Mapping the outcomes back to what's core to what they do every day leads to successful implementation, and that's why we care about this stuff, even though it is kind of tedious and boring sometimes. Great. So, we have a little exercise. And we'll get towards the end here. In terms of mapping metrics and outcomes to your organizational priorities, what was difficult, and whether this is a useful tool. So that's what I'm kind of interested in hearing from this report out. Do I have any volunteers who are willing to share their experiences with using this tool? That's
starting, I will pick on you too. I'm getting older.
And not the same ones you picked on.
Not the same ones. Just a clarity. I'm just kidding. Yes, great. Okay, we've got our first volunteer.
Okay.
So where did you have a relatively easier time doing these exercises? Is knowing what is it that we do, that's the easy part.
Good. Knowing what I do. Good.
What I do, I think
That
that's
first
the easy
column.
part in our mission, so that was the easy part. What kinds of outcomes or metrics were easier to map to financial milestones and strategies? I think that once you understand what is it that you are trying to accomplish, you can start to see where is it that you want to go. But sometimes what you measure may not necessarily be the correct measure. You know, like for instance, I know that we can measure the number of families that we counsel. That's easy to measure.
Right.
But that really matters. You know, I think what really matters is what is it coming out of that measure. So it's really not. So really, what we want to look at then is like how many people actually get the goals they set out to, and that's going to vary by family. So we have to kind of get into an understanding of what is it, what kind of goals we're really going to measure. So for instance, if I was to measure like how many people actually reduce their debts, then I guess I would want to see how many people that actually came for that completed a debt management program, for instance. That would be that would be a little harder to get into that part.
Sure. I think you make a really excellent point that we often fall into the trap of measuring inputs and outputs, right? It's really easy to measure the number of people who attended this training today, right? But then actually going forth and saying, all right, did that actually change the way a client receives services 6 months from now? That is really hard to track, but it's also, if that's why we're doing it, then we have to figure that out, right? And that's why this is the tedious part. People shy away from doing it. Because getting to tracking those outcomes is always harder than tracking the outputs. Really important.
And I think it also becomes difficult when, I mean, you know what you're doing, but it's a little global, like to say, oh, our mission is to help families become self-sufficient. But then you start breaking it down and you're responsible for implementing 10 different strategies to get them to become self-sufficient. And then you break that down even more, it can almost be like, not just tedious, but a little overwhelming.
Right.
To say, how can you come up with outcomes that maybe are a little more global, that fall into all these, and that are more easily measurable than all, being all over the place. And so I think that's what was a little more difficult for me, is to try to think more in terms of, okay, so how do we all,
Right.
what's the common outcome?
How do we start to group things
How do
together?
we start to group them together?
Right, and also how do we think about what's feasible?
Right.
Right, for what we can achieve as an organization. We'll get into feasibility next month as well. Absolutely. Other experiences you want to share? Yes.
What did you have relatively easier time doing? I think it was easy defining the success. I mean, because it's already defined in our agency's mission. So, for example, family and community safety is one way that we define our organization's success. What outcomes are you currently measuring? We're currently measuring like protective factors. For example, like social connection, resiliency, things like that. And so it was hard for me because I was trying to think about, because that's more of like protective factors that we're measuring that will decrease, right, child abuse, but but how does resiliency play into financial? And so it made me really think about that as well, which of course if a family learns how to budget or learn how to put savings or a rainy day fund away, then that creates resiliency because then they'll be able to bounce back.
Right.
And what personal financial issues do your customer face that affects these outcomes? There were actually quite a bit, and I listed a few things, but like
I guess 49% divorce rate is due to finance. You know, that causes a lot of stress within couples and then leads to domestic violence. And then what financial milestone could you track related to addressing these issues? That one I haven't really gone to yet. But yeah, but it was a little bit difficult, and I think it takes a little bit more time to, again, look at it, how it relates to each program. Yes, this is a very useful.
You know, going back to the conversation with the metrics, measuring the outcomes beyond just activities, you know, when does it, it's balanced, because when does it become so resource intensive to be trying to track these downstream outcomes that you're spending time, so much time of your you know, your staff time just tracking that, and then reporting and tracking reporting. It's got to be a balance there, and that's one of the challenges for us. I mean, if we're trying to measure revenue, you know, increase in jobs and increase in our business portfolio, right? We want to see that our businesses are improving, and so literally we're on the phone tracking down tax returns and financials on a quarterly basis sometimes to do that, and so that's something we've had to balance is, you know, how much time do we invest into that versus helping new clients.
And you know, I think having struggled with that exact issue in the past, it's obviously every organization is different in terms of the weight that they place on outcomes measurement, and every funder is a little bit different about that. And some will take logic models in lieu of outcome measurements, and others will demand randomized control trials. Right? This is different ends of the spectrum. And then there's what do we have the capacity to do as an organization. So I think there's a balance that is unique for each organization. Yes.
I just wanted to point out that when you apply for a grant and receive a grant, the structure is pretty much defined for you as to what you have to measure. And probably when you're putting together the grant application, that's when you may ask yourself all those questions. But I think you have to demonstrate that there is a good return on the investment on whoever is giving you that money in order to justify the continuance of that service.
Absolutely, and that's really where, you know, that model I think is helpful, and for many it will be at the point of applying for a grant or establishing a new program. You know, this workforce agency that we're working with in New York City, they've got this big contract from the city that is welfare to work, and they have defined outcomes. This is what they have to measure. But as an organization, they really looked at it and said, but we know this financial security stuff is important. And it's up to them to create this mapping and say, you know, do we draw this logically back to what's important for our funder? Will this actually affect our ability to achieve those outcomes that we're responsible for to that funder? And they're doing it after the grant or the contract has been awarded. We're trying to work it in that way. But, you know, and I think that's why we have to really think about and be judicious about what are the strategies that really matter against these outcomes that you're ultimately responsible for. Yes?
Do you have something that maybe like standards in terms of like, you know, what is, or I guess how do I say it? Like short term, like what would be considered success in terms of short term, mid-term, and long term? Do you have
For any one of these
have you
strategies?
created like like a standard?
I think the closest thing is like with the Spark Point centers, and there are similar centers like that, like Centers Families and List Financial Opportunity Centers. Like they might have done something like that, and we can look into it to see.
Or like what would high quality and medium or low quality look like?
Right, and where do you set the bar?
Yeah.
There's the indicator, but then it's like, well, what's good enough, you know?
No, I think there are a lot of tools that are missing yet in that sort of sense of where all those gaps are and where people need tools is something I've been paying attention to lately. So last one, and then I'm going to turn it over to wrap up.
This is actually really good for funders too, because as a funder, we actually do have common measurement systems that instead of having the agency tell us how they're going to measure, we ask them how they measure currently, but then they'll use our measurement system that we can pull up online in all of our areas. And so having these conversations with them ongoing, we might not have uncovered the barriers yet or the possible, like I love this last question, what financial milestones could you track? You know, so, you know, we haven't uncovered all of those. So those could get implemented in our funding strategies as well.
All right, well, we're going to leave it here for today, and we'll pick all of this back up in June. And turn it over to Daryl to wrap us up a little bit today.
All right. Well, great. Let's thank Jen and Kate for what they've done today. You know, we always struggle with what level do we provide these types of workshops at, you know, and I just, knowing a lot of you from up and down the valley, realize that, you know, we have some really experienced folks in this field. We have some that are just breaking into it. And so we really wanted to kind of find a middle ground where one thing is that you have information that's useful for you as, you know, experienced folks, some new tools and things, and then for those that this is a whole new opportunity for, we really wanted to help develop this framework. And again, it's about developing a framework and building a movement, right? Everywhere you go these days, everybody's talking about asset building. They want to know what you mean by that and how to explain it. So hopefully today that was what you received, a number of these tools as to how to go about explaining what asset building is. But before we go, I just want to see from you guys just a couple of quick things before we get into the evaluations. What did you guys kind of struggle with the most today? Just a couple of things. Daryl forgot to send out the list of everyone so we could carpool together. Yes, that was my big faux pas. I meant to do that last week. I was in Fresno late last week and I forgot my computer. So when you work remotely and you don't have your computer, of course you can't get work done. No, seriously.
I think something that we have when we talk about this like beforehand, because there was some very important notes that I wanted to fit like.
So just a handout of the presentations. Anything else? Any other concepts you guys struggle with?
I think this is pretty unique to CCRH in that we're a coalition of a bunch of different members, so we personally don't have clients, right? Our network partners have the clients.
Sure.
So it's a little difficult for us, but.
But you have some tools now for when you're working or you're trying to bring people into your network.
Right.
You have a framework to develop.
Yeah, which is good.
Right, and that's part of what the goal is, right? We're trying to really create a movement here in the Valley, get everybody on the same page. So when you talk to funders, you're not going to have to spend 30 minutes trying to explain to them what you're getting at. You can just sit down, they understand, they get it, they know it, and move on.
Oh.
What's most exciting about today? Getting to see Daryl again. Jen and Kate. Networking, yes. Anything else?
I love being around new faces.
I'm
tired of the Sacramento.
I think it's also just the opportunity to see different resources that are valuable to some people, the tools, the different activities, because like you said, different funders may require different things like the logic models or a different way of reporting, and so it's just good sometimes to see something different and see how that might be able to be integrated, or maybe it's better than something that you thought was good because you start seeing all these little gaps. That was really
great. Any other comments on that? Well, our goals for today really, one was to introduce new tools, get a good understanding of what these tools were, provide you with some really good opportunity to learn about this framework, move it forward so you can sell it to your executive directors, your boards, just your supervisors, folks like that, other founders. You had a question?
Yes. Does it come in the website?
The handouts, we'll get to the handouts in just a second. Another goal for today was to identify the financial security barriers that are affecting the program's success. Kind of nailed on that. And then brought forth a number of indicators to consider integrating into your program. I mean, this data, I mean, it's all about data, right? I mean, but then how do you take that data and tell a story? And I think that was really what our goal was for today. Again, introductory type opportunity. We're hoping to see, well, looking forward to seeing your faces on May 30th at our next workshop. Hopefully, of course, the next workshop will be in Fresno from 11 to 3 on May 30th. We're trying to get the Fresno EOC center, but stay tuned as to what the location will really fill out. We're also looking to build off of today's workshop, the foundation of today's workshop, but really focus on integrating these asset building strategies into your programs in a range of different settings. We'll also present a variety of models for integration and include the who, how, and when to implement those. With a number of objectives, we'll be to gain an understanding of different models for integrating asset building, develop or gain an understanding of the questions you should be asking your organization to determine the best model for you guys to go forward in this, develop the ability to select specific strategies to include in your program design, and lastly, map a plan for building staff capacity. That's always a big issue, right? How do we get that capacity within your organization to move this stuff forward? So hopefully we will see all of you May 30th. We will be in touch via email and other forms of communication. Of course, I'm always open to phone calls and emails from folks, so please don't hesitate to call me. You now have 2 new folks to put in your tool belt. Both Kate and Jen, I believe if you contact them, would be more than willing to answer your questions and put you in contact with other resources. Lastly, in your packet of stuff that you picked up when you signed in, you have this nice handy-dandy evaluation form. Really ask that you guys take a few minutes and just really seriously think this through, because again, it's going to help us determine as we finalize workshop number 2 what we need to do differently and how to go about doing that. And then lastly, we do have a bit of homework. We've got all these wonderful handouts here, the integration guide, integration series, all of this wonderful stuff. We hope that you take the opportunity to read that prior to May 30th. Again, May 30th from 11 to 3, we will be back in contact. Similar type process where we'll just go ahead and register you guys in. You'll get confirmation emails with all that information. Any questions or comments, concerns, feel free to contact me. If you need to think you might benefit from bringing someone else in, also let me know and we can talk about whether or not we have the room for that. But with that, any last parting words?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.